Hello and welcome to this episode of For Your Journey. For this episode, we're just coming fresh out of our Thanksgiving Sunday this past weekend, and we're approaching later this week, tomorrow, our Thanksgiving national holiday. I wanted to dive in more into the topic of Thanksgiving and especially pull out a point from your service that you just held, District Apostle, about the table. I wanted to dive into that a little bit more and get some additional thoughts on that.
Okay. Well, that's from the 23rd Psalm of David, and it's one of the later verses. It says, "You prepare a table for me in the midst of my enemies." And it gives a nice indication of David's recognition that even in the middle of other circumstances, the Lord was with him and providing for him. Even so much so, the next verse says, "My cup runs over."
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, I don't know when he wrote it. I don't know if that's known or not, if that was in shepherd boy time and that was the enemies, or if it was when he was the king and the Philistines and the other people were the enemies. But nevertheless, we also live in a time where it's sometimes difficult and the enemy can be all different things that are in opposition to us. And yet the Lord provides a table. That's a nice thing because it's not just you have the feeling it's a big meal. It's not just something small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially this cup running over seems juxtaposed with the earlier topic from this year from Pentecost, and we did a 4-year journey on it too about the crumbs. You know, like cup running over, you think of like abundance, and crumbs you think of minuscule, very little. You know, and there's an interesting juxtaposition there that God provides either way, no matter what we're perceiving.
And everything we receive is sufficient for us to carry us forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially with this enemies topic, you brought that out in service too. A lot of things could be seen as enemies that are working against us: unemployment, sickness, just general stress and anxiety of relationships and schooling and uncertainty and all these things. It could almost be tempting for someone to say, "Well, I know God has allowed it. He may not have caused it, but He's allowed it. Is God my enemy?" Right? And that we got to correct that a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. We wouldn't want to fall to that kind of thinking and recognize, and that's the key, to see the abundance of God's provision even in the midst of difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, another example of that is Daniel. We read that as an interesting thing in Bel and the Dragon. At the end of that book in Apocrypha, it talks about that God picked up a Habakkuk, the prophet from another country, and dropped them in the lion's den with a meal already prepared to show Daniel that he's taking care of him. And it's such a beautiful thing that Daniel says, "Oh God, you have remembered me." And in the midst of the lion's den, the lions all around and so on, and the danger and the concern of that, and yet God provided for him. And then when he was done eating, he took the prophet back to his country, and David had the assurance, God is with me. And I think in these times, it's very important that we have that.
Mm-hmm. And it's hopefully an attitude we have woven through all of our interactions, through all of our weeks and days, but especially now. That's one of the reasons we have holidays, is to bring a certain sensitivity, certain awareness to those attitudes, to those foundational just behaviors and thoughts that we have, not only as people, just as Christians, realizing that we want to be thankful all the time, but especially now in a what could be considered a turbulent year, as we're approaching a holiday, you know, to draw attention to that.
Especially with Thanksgiving, because sometimes we might have the feeling Thanksgiving you do after you're done, after something's finished, after something wonderful has happened, then you make a Thanksgiving. Interesting to note historically that a woman is responsible for promoting the idea of, in our country, having a National Thanksgiving Day. And she talked to 2 or 3 presidents about it, and nobody responded. And finally, when the word got to Lincoln, when he was the president, he established it as a national day. It wasn't fixed yet until later. Another president, Roosevelt, did that, but he established it as a national day of Thanksgiving in the midst of the Civil War. He didn't wait to the end of it. In the middle of it, he said, "No, let us stop and make Thanksgiving in the middle." And that's the feeling that is interesting to me, to recognize in the midst of my life, all the things going on, good, bad, everything, the Lord's with me. And I should be thankful for that and see what are the goodness, what is my cup running over with, and find that. If it's important that we search for that.
Hmm. I think even the chief apostle commented on that within the last month or so about pretty much the indicating sign of a mature Christian, that a mature or a growing, I forget exactly the description he was using, but like the indicator is a thankful person. You know,
Yeah.
when we're thankful and realizing our relationship to our creator and that everything is allowed by him and that he is provided, like you're saying, even in situations such as Daniel, when he's in the lion's den and the lions have been starved so that they're hungrier, so that they would ravage him more.
Yeah.
Even then, in those types of situations, when it seems hopeless, God provides.
And I think it's necessary to have both love to God so that we don't become distracted with other ideas,
Mm.
and humbleness before God to recognize, to be thankful. When we're arrogant or we think we're doing it all ourselves, or if I don't do it, who's going to do it for me? Then that takes it away. But when one
Mm.
is humble and in love with Christ, then thankfulness is a result of that.
Right. Oh, great. Well, thank you for sharing some additional thoughts on that. And thank you for joining us on this episode of For Your Journey. We wish you a wonderful Thanksgiving, wherever that may find you. And we look forward to the next time we can connect. And this has been For Your Journey.